Well, welcome back to the Rice Report, everybody. I am Eric Rice. Today I'm joined by Gordon Chang, who doesn't really need much of an introduction. He is the leading authority on all things China here in this country. And we're hearing a lot of rumors swirling. We're hearing a lot of things happen, tariff wars, geopolitics, all kinds of things happening. And I am just really appreciative you're here today, Gordon, to kind of give us information directly from the source. And what a pleasure it is to have you. Thank you for coming on today.
Oh, what a pleasure to be talking to you. So thank you so much, Eric.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, give us a quick rundown. The basics, we know there's tensions between the tariffs between the two nations. We know that there's tensions always over Taiwan, and that's kind of a long-standing battle. But give us a rundown of where China is right now economically and politically.
From an economics point of view, China appears to have an economy that is contracting. We don't know. I mean, they actually tell us that they got a robust growth of 5.4% in the first quarter. But also there's deflation. So for instance, in June, there was the 33rd, I think, straight month of decline in the producer price index, which measures factory gate prices. In June, the consumer price index actually managed a 0.1% increase year on year, but that's after 4 months of declines. And for the first half year as a whole, the prices declined consumer prices declined 0.1%. Deflation really shows an economy getting smaller. And even if it weren't at this moment, and I believe it is, but even if it weren't, deflation means the economy can't recover. That's just economics. And we Americans should know that because that was our Great Depression in the 1930s. Also, we've gotten China property prices falling. And that's important because 70% of the wealth of the middle class is property. And basically, there's too much supply. A couple of years ago, former senior statistics official said that China had enough vacant apartments for the entire population of 1.4 billion people. Although this official did admit that some people believe that the number was enough vacant apartments for 3 billion people. So you can see that there's really no escape from this. But the big story in China right now is not so much the economy, although that's fundamental and underlying things. The big story is the political system, where it appears that there is intense infighting among senior officials. And I think Xi Jinping has been weakened. We don't know exactly what's going on, Eric, because the political system is more opaque than it has been in a long time. But it does appear that Xi Jinping has lost control of the Chinese military, and there's a corroboration for that. And it also appears that he's having problems among senior civilian officials, although there's less corroboration on the civilian side. But this is highlighted for most people because Xi Jinping did not go to the BRICS Summit in Rio a couple days ago, which is a real indication that this is the first time he's missed a BRICS Summit.
Yeah.
So this is a real indication that Xi Jinping is not permitted to leave the country, or he feels that he can't leave. But whatever the case is, it ain't good for the people who like stability in China because it's just not a stable country right now.
So, what are the rumors swirling? Are there any rumors swirling of why he wouldn't attend a BRICS conference? And did they send an emissary in his place?
Yeah, they sent the premier, Li Chang, who has been actually over the last several, let's say, month or so, has had a much more prominent role in media than in the past. So that's a real indication that something is up. But clearly, in the military, there is real problems for China. And we know this because Xi Jinping's senior loyalists have been disappearing. And a lot of people were saying, oh, Xi Jinping got rid of his own people. And that's possible, but it's not very likely. And the reason is that PLA Daily, which is the most authoritative publication of the Chinese military, since July 9th of last year has carried a series of articles that praise collective leadership. Now, that phrase is a direct slap at Xi Jinping's one-man style of rule. And these articles are known to have been written by those who were aligned with China's #1 uniformed officer, General Zhang Youshao, who is known to be unhappy with Xi Jinping. So this is a clear indication that Xi Jinping has lost control of the military, because a number of Xi Jinping's loyalists have just disappeared, including his number one hatchet man, General He Weidong, who was last seen in public on March 11th. There are rumors that he was suicided at the military's 301 hospital in Beijing. We don't know if those rumors are true or not, but we know that General He has been out of action, which means he's not able to help Xi Jinping.
So are these seem like cries for democracy of some sort, or maybe a weakening of the CCP? And of course, you eloquently state constantly, we don't really know. I mean, China is a closed door, which is why I'd love to have you on here today, because you're looking through that glass in the middle of that door. Could this be? I see it two ways. It's either China fighting for a free democracy, multi-rule democratic system, or the CCP is playing games to keep a stronghold on the society, or both. What do you think is happening? Of course, you don't know, but what do you think is happening with this?
Um, the rumors and the events we're seeing is basically elites fighting elites.
Hmm.
And this is happening. The Chinese people are watching this, but they're not real participants in it. So this is the Communist Party tearing itself apart. It's not to say that they will succeed in that goal, but I think that this is elite infighting. Now, on the Chinese people themselves, I think that, and Mike, this is just a guess, but they want more say in their lives. That may not be
Of course,
democracy as
yeah.
we know it, but they clearly are unhappy with the Chinese political system. And we know that for sure, Eric, because if the Communist Party wouldn't be spending so much of its resources on coercing the Chinese people and keeping them in line. If the Chinese people loved the Communist Party, they wouldn't have to do this. But we know that at least they report spending more on domestic security than they do on the external security. So that's a real indication that the Chinese people, if left on their own, would do something different. Also, we do know something, and that is beginning October 2022, there were these series of extraordinary protests through China when the Chinese people across many cities, many areas, just said they had enough. They took to the streets.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't really care about the consequences. It died down after 3.5 months, but these were protests across the country. Just people, that says that people are volatile right now. Society is volatile. So the Communist Party has a real problem. It can maintain stability if it's united, but it doesn't look united at the top.
Well, and if it is a battle between elites, there is no larger deficit between elite and normal person anywhere in the world than China. I mean, these elites in China are massively wealthy. I mean, it is, they've
Yes,
stolen wealth from everyone. So when
right.
you think of an American elite, you can probably 2x that in China with wealth, buying power, and influence. I mean, this is a real problem over there.
Oh, more than that. Their Gini coefficient, which measures inequality,
Hmm.
is so much just off the charts. The only place that I can think that might have a greater disparity between the elite and normal people would be North Korea.
Yeah.
But with the exception
Yeah.
of North Korea, I think you're right.
North Korea is kind of like the comedic anomaly for evil and despair. I mean, it's such a drastic change from normal life everywhere else in the world. But there is an economic alliance between North Korea and China. North Korea consistently sells workers to China or slaves to China in exchange for GDP growth.
Um, Actually, it's more than just economic alliance. There is a formal military alliance
Yeah.
between China and North Korea. As a matter of fact, it's China's only alliance, a military alliance. So that shows you the bonds there. Now, a lot of people will say, well, the Koreans, they don't like the Chinese. Yeah, that's true. For 600 years or more, Chinese and Koreans have been fighting each other, and the border has moved hundreds of miles in both
Mhm.
directions because of conquest. And now we have ethnic Koreans living in China, and that's a result of that border being moved. But when it comes push to shove, Kim Jong Un, the leader of North Korea, knows that he needs China to stay in business. And that
100%.
means that when the Chinese want something, the Koreans will do it. So although the North Koreans don't like, hate abhor, whatever word you want, the Chinese. That bond between the two regimes is a tight one.
And that's a difficult one to handle for a nation. Like, you're absolutely tied to someone you hate. That's
Right.
a difficult position. But China, as we know, soccer stadium financing has been going on for 40 years, and all the stuff around the world. They now have strong ties to Iran, which is in conflict with Israel, with us, potentially. What has that looked like? And this is something I talk about on Twitter Spaces and on here quite a bit. Since Afghanistan, the withdrawal in Afghanistan, that oil pipeline from Iran has gone directly into China. How does the Chinese alliance impact Iran or our potential conflict in Iran in the future?
Well, Iran wants to buy Chinese J-10 fighters. Those are
Yeah.
generation 4.5 planes, probably better than our F-16s. Now we're trying to stop that, but that just shows you how close they are. I think that China essentially empowers the Iranian regime, and Iran would not have been able to launch the October 7th attacks were it not for Chinese support. So, for instance, you have China taking more than 90% of Iran's exports of crude oil. That is critically important. China provides diplomatic and propaganda support for Iran. Iranian weapons include Chinese components, including microchips. China supplies weapons to Iran's main proxy groups, Hezbollah, Houthi militia, Hamas. And we have seen all sorts of support there. So, Iran is able to attack Israel because of China.
Well, through proxy, and I won't get into October 7th and the opinion that it's not the topic today, but they also have an alliance with Russia, and
Oh,
and that was kind of forced in by sanction.
one more thing. Iran has a nuclear weapons program because of China. China has supplied just about everything that Iran needed to develop a bomb. It did that either directly or indirectly through Pakistan's AQ-Khan network. So China has essentially made the war between Israel and Iran virtually inevitable.
And that's why you're watching the alliance of the support in that whole region. I mean, Pakistan's by far not innocent in any of this stuff, but in the middle of it, let's talk about the Chinese-Russian alliance. I think that's one that a lot of people don't understand. When the sanctions were placed, Russia was still selling massive amounts of natural resources to China, and that's kind of what elevated BRICS. And I think a lot of people think BRICS just popped up. It's from 2009. This plan's been in place for a very long time, and strategically, they've been trying to align themselves to, defunk or deplete or deflate the US dollar's power around the world. Is that alliance real? I mean, like, we don't know. You're one of the only people, by the way, I will give you so much credit. You are one of the only people on US news that talks about foreign nations. We really don't get a whole lot of world news out there from anyone studying it. But talk to me a little bit about Russia and China and the alliance there.
Yeah, China and Russia are very close. Now, a lot of people and a lot of very smart people in New York and Washington will say, well, China and Russia have been adversaries and enemies over the course of centuries, and all of that is true. And I don't care about China and Russia in the 2060s or 2070s when they probably won't be friends.
Right.
I worry about China and Russia right now.
Yeah.
And right now, they're very close. And the reason is that Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping see the world in the same terms, and they define their interests identically or almost identically. And of course, they see the same enemy, which is us.
Yeah.
And I think that Xi Jinping views Vladimir Putin as a really important part of the partnership. And, people say, well, Russia's a junior partner, and I can agree with that. But
Sure.
Putin does something that Xi Jinping would love to do, but is afraid to do on his own. And that is to disrupt the international system in an obvious way. So China has supported Russia's war on Ukraine, and that has been across the board as well. So with elevated commodity purchases, just like Iran, diplomatic and propaganda support, military intelligence support, weapons support, and we're seeing actually Chinese mercenaries fighting for Russia in Ukraine. And People's Liberation Army officers are actually in Ukraine. They're there as observers, I guess, maybe as advisors. but China's got his military there, which could just be the opening wedge of China's support for Russia. So Russia, the way I look at this is that Xi Jinping is disrupting the world. He's doing it through proxy wars.
Yep.
He's doing it through Russia and Ukraine. He's doing it in the Middle East through Iran attacking Israel. And along with Russia, China is fueling insurgencies in North Africa that look like wars. So China is setting the world on fire. And that's because Xi Jinping has taken a page out of his heroes, Mao Zedong's playbook, because Mao thought that chaos would lead to worldwide Chinese rule. And I think that Xi Jinping sees the destruction of societies like Ukraine, like Israel, as being just intermediary steps on his way to complete control of humanity.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, order through chaos has been a constant theme kind of since the Roman Empire, and a lot of these dynasty dictators in their nations seem to find that to be a very entertaining way to get power across the board. Uh, Connections from China, and a lot of economists that watch this will totally understand the Chinese economy by itself. We're looking at, I think it's 130% GDP, debt to GDP, just in commercial lending, just in corporate lending. Massive amount of money printing has happened over there. And they do have not direct ties, but correlation with the Japanese economy, which is also struggling right now. So all of Asia is in turmoil. And we talk about Taiwan all the time, the Silicon Shield, the semiconductor development. But that entire area right now is a powder keg economically. And it's being, fighting wars, funding proxy wars, propaganda campaigns. These things all cost money. Even the things that were costing money are buying oil pipelines from Iran, buying commodities from Russia. This is expenditure of capital. And I think about 4 months ago, we saw a huge print of the yuan. What is the overall kind of Asian economy right now? Because everything's intertwined. In the last 80 years, we've gone global. So it just takes one. It's kind of like a Christmas tree. With one light bulb goes out, the whole stream goes out. If you have a cheap line, like get the better lights at Christmas. But where are we at overall in that region of the world economically?
Well, the region is basically in turmoil because tariff war,
Hmm.
and if you want to call it that. Um, the United States has really been really been the growth of global the engine of global growth. The Chinese always say that they are, but they're not. Because to be the engine of global growth, you got to buy the goods and services of other countries to create growth elsewhere. And China, with its predatory and criminal trade practices, takes growth from other countries. So, the United States accounts for something like 38, 39% of global consumer spending. So we're the people, we are the economy of last resort. And Asia has all these export powerhouses. You mentioned there's China, there's Malaysia, Taiwan, Japan, South Korea. They all depend on the US market. And Trump has said, no, we're not going to do this anymore. And Trump is absolutely right about this
Yep.
because we cannot afford to run these huge merchandise trade deficits as we have in the past. Last year, our merchandise trade deficit with China was $295.4 billion. That was up 5.8% from 2023. We just can't afford to continue that. People may say they don't like tariffs, and okay, but the point is, what are you going to do about this trade deficit? Because something has to be done. And by the way, when we're talking about trade, we're talking also about the decimation of American factories
Yep.
sector, American communities. The reason why we have a fentanyl problem in many places is because of the loss of hope. That's because people don't have jobs. That's because of China.
Yeah. No, you're right. I mean, people don't equate that. I grew up next to a Ford plant that shut down when I was a kid, and that place has gone from a prosperous middle class neighborhood into a crack den. It takes about 10 years for complete collapse when manufacturing centers go down. And that's one example of thousands over the past 40 years that have gone over to China since they entered into the World Trade Organization. Um, the other thing is currency. And Gordon, I'm going to bounce something off you and see if this makes sense. So we just announced a Genius Act, which, from a crypto perspective, somebody who's defiant of the Federal Reserve, it's a bailout for the banks. They get to keep all the interest from buying U.S. Treasuries. There's clearly a lack of demand for U.S. Treasuries at the moment. These stable coins will absorb that. They'll also get the dollar and make it a bigger powerhouse throughout the entire globe, especially the global South, where places like China, which won't allow it, but places in Asia right now, these currencies are weak. And people keep talking about our dollar weakening. We're at 97 on the DXY, which is a horrible comparison comparing us to other currencies. But against gold, we're very depleted. So I think that this rollout, this dominance effect that will happen, if you're in Malaysia or you're in even Japan, you're going to be using a US stablecoin because you're going to have more buying power at every store you go to. I think that this is an economic war waging between them to weaken the yuan and the Asian currencies, also Russia, even parts of Europe. I think this Genius Act is a genius thing to do. Number one, because it actually buys the debt that no one's buying. It extends U.S. dollar dominance around the globe. But the global effects of that could be complete collapses of small Asian economies. Because why would you ever use a local currency when you can use a U.S. dollar on a stable coin? Are people even talking about this in the DC sphere in this manner? Because it has long tail effects.
Yeah, they are talking about it, especially in New York. The problem in Asia right now, and the problem for China, when you step back and you look at all this, the China would like to attack the dollar, and it's doing it. But the point is, you can't attack the dollar if you don't have an open currency. And
Right.
the renminbi is, first of all, not convertible on the capital account. And although they say it's convertible on the current account, it often is not as a practical matter because they don't sometimes allow repatriation of dividends and stuff. So the renminbi is just not a challenger to the dollar, and it's not been able to increase substantially its share of global trade. So the problem for China right now is that it needs an open currency. But if it had an open currency, freely convertible currency, everyone would be taking their money out of China right now. So,
Right.
um, yes, you look at the BRICS, but they're no longer talking about a BRICS currency because
Right.
that's just impossible. The
It's a
euro is
fallacy.
having
Yeah.
problems enough, but when you take countries that are very, very different and try to cobble together a common currency, that's just impossible, as we're finding. And by the way, BRICS has I in it. That's India, and India does not want to be part of any anti-Western campaign. So that's frustrating China and Russia's use of the BRICS to attack the US.
Yeah, the BRICS conversation when it popped up. I mean, I've started reading about BRICS in 2010, and then as you learn, I mean, it really kind of went dormant for years, and then 2021 is really when BRICS became an issue again, talking about this commodities-backed currency, and people panicked all over the board. And I'm like, okay, first of all, no one would trust a U.S. commodities-backed currency. Do you think anyone in the world is going to trust Russia and China to actually have the commodities that back their currency? But this is how warfare is fought today. We try to avoid kinetic warfare. Kinetic warfare is used to create chaos, which will drive agendas. But in general, these global scale wars that are happening now are through currency, economics, and information. And China, kind of the master, because you don't know what the heck is happening there. And there's no disclosure, and really reporting is not allowed in that nation. So, how difficult is it for you? I mean, you're kind of looking at government statistics, but how difficult is it for you to be able to get information out of China to verify or discredit information coming out of the government?
I know less about China than I did 2, 3 years ago.
Wow.
Certainly, and I think that's true for most people because the regime has prevented a lot of information from coming out. So, for instance, wind information, which is China's Bloomberg, not
Mhm.
available to foreigners. And you have all of these academic exchanges, which have once prospered, are now shut down. So there's a lot less that we know about what's happening inside China. And so we're doing a lot more guessing than we did before. But that's what we have to resort to.
Yeah, sometimes in an information war, silence is the most effective weapon, and they seem to wield that at will. How about in America? So we have, we don't know the exact number. I've heard 250,000, 500,000 Chinese students here, many of them in coordination with the CCP. That was obviously a main campaign topic under Trump, saying we got to get rid of these people and shut that down. But now there's a different agenda coming from the White House saying, well, maybe we can leave them here. Is this the number one? Like I lived in California for years. I'm in technology. You couldn't attend a single cocktail party in Silicon Valley without someone who was definitely, without question, from China, right? Like they're kind of infiltrating the technology sector. Has that threat of them infiltrating and spying in America and sharing back to China, has that been reduced at all? I mean, it's a threat. It's never going to not be a threat. But has that been reduced at all in the last 6 months?
I think that it's been reduced because people are now worried about it, and so the China deals are decreasing. But it's as long as you have Chinese parties with money, that there's always going to be that threat.
Always.
It's just that there's now, I think, a growing appreciation that China is a hostile actor. But you know what we do? We need the president of the United States to use his emergency powers under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act to prevent these deals, just prohibit them, make them illegal. And until that happens, we're going to have the leakage of technology that you talk about.
And can he use that act without congressional oversight? Can he enact that on his own?
The federal courts have not been too kind to President Trump when he's used the 77 Act. If I were Trump, I would just go straight to the Trading with the Enemy Act of 1917, which makes it much more difficult for the courts to second guess him. And we
Hmm.
have a basis to use that.
Because in my opinion, that seems to be something we need to. There's a lot of things we need to shut down. I mean, there are pipelines of illegals and legals taking American jobs. Like I'm one of the few people who talks about H-1B visas, which are devastating to. I think a report came out earlier today that showed that some of the most unemployed graduates in America right now are all in STEM. So we keep hearing we have this shortage of STEM professionals and shortage of STEM workers, but that's not true. And India is a major purveyor of that bring in these middle class jobs, steal these middle class college graduate level jobs. So of course, India isn't going to rebel against the West. I'm sure there's kickbacks there, but we have to shut down the China trade because that is a major pipeline for political corruption. That's how most of these deals get done. What are the odds that Trump enacts that act from 1917?
Um, I don't know. It's
No
all
one
in
knows. Yeah,
one
I put you on
person's.
the spot, Gordon. I was just trying to trick you
It's
into that.
all in one person's head. My sense is, Trump doesn't want to do that. Clearly, he wants to
Yeah,
have a relationship with China. But I think that over the course of this second term, the Chinese are going to push him too hard. And at
yeah.
some point, he's going to have to do things that he does not want to do. And one of them is going to be, I think, invoking the Trading with the Enemy Act of 17. We've seen Trump being pushed around by Putin, for instance, and Trump is now getting angry. And I think we're going to see the same dynamic with Xi Jinping. And Xi Jinping has been doing the same thing on TikTok, dragging his feet. He's also, this rare earths. On the May 12th agreement, the Chinese agreed to start sending rare earths to the US to lift the embargo that was put in place after April 2nd, as they promised
Yep.
to do on May 12th. Well, the Chinese haven't done it. So I'm sure that's ticking off President Trump. But it's going to take a little bit more for that to happen. But I think it will happen. The Chinese will push too far, just as Putin is pushing too far.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. Completely agree. Eventually, that bow is going to break at some point. And hold on, I'm gonna have to
Yeah.
pause here because my cleaning people are vacuuming. Can you hear the vacuum?
Nope.
Okay, good. I have a good microphone. It's only within 3 feet. My cleaning lady is literally vacuuming the room next door. So I'll edit that out. So Gordon, as we kind of wrap up here, what would be? I mean, no one can predict the future, and that's not what you do. You're describing relations. There's plenty of people predicting what they think will happen, and a couple of them will be right, and most of them will be wrong. That's the way it goes with this. But if we looked at the overall story that we have here, we have an elite infighting, power depletion across the board, chaos in civilization, very similar to America. So the same thing that's kind of happening in China is happening here on a less violent, obvious scale. But we have a lot of civil unrest as they do. We have a housing crisis in China. Actually, before I do that, what are these ghost cities? How and why are there 1.4 billion apartments with no one living in them? I can't believe I skipped that question.
Well, it's because in 2000, China right now is having a 2008 downturn.
Yeah.
Is this way to think about it. In 2008, China didn't want to have a downturn, so its leaders embarked on what could be the biggest debt-fueled stimulus program in history. And to give you a sense of how big it was, in 2009 and the following 4 years, China created an amount of credit in its banking system, which was about equal to that in the US banking system, even though in 2008, China's economy was less than one-third the size of ours.
Hmm.
So you can imagine, yeah, they created a lot of growth, and part of that growth was ghost cities. When you build an apartment block, that's GDP, gross domestic product. But it is, and actually when you tear it down, which is what some municipalities are doing now because they got too much supply, that's also gross
That
domestic
adds to
product.
GDP. Yeah, it's a way of
But there,
manufacturing GDP.
but there's another aspect here, and that is because China runs a closed currency system, which we talked about, and because the Chinese people don't really trust the stock markets, they got to put their money into something. And
Hmm.
what they put their money into are vacant apartments. So, a lot of these vacant apartments, yes, no one's living there, but they actually are bought and paid for.
Hmm.
But the point is, it's sort of like a gold coin. Americans might have a gold coin or might have shares in Verizon or whatever. But the Chinese, what they do is they buy apartments, or at least they did. And now there's just no demand for those apartments. So the value of those apartments are falling fast.
What a
So
Ponzi scheme. I mean,
it,
it's not a Ponzi scheme. What a fraud.
it is, yeah, it was completely unsustainable because eventually, although, you could say, well, vacant apartments are like gold coins. The point is eventually someone has to have demand for them to give them
Right. People want to
value.
buy gold coins. Absolutely.
People want to buy gold coins. Right now, they don't want to buy vacant apartments in China.
Nobody wants to buy apartment 36 on Main Street in a ghost city 45 miles outside of civilization.
Right.
I mean, if you guys are watching this and don't know, there are full ghost cities with movie theaters, stores, restaurants, apartments with no one living in them in China right now, the size of Boise, Idaho. Some of them are the size of Boise. There's literally no one living there. I've always wanted to ask somebody that, but it makes sense to me. It's a GDP manipulation on the buildup and the teardown.
Right, and it created growth. Also, by the way, when local officials took land from peasants, they were able. The local officials were able to flip that land to developers and made enormous amounts of money. So there was a real financial incentive for officials to do this. So you had a lot of incentives going the same way, which was creating, more and more of these apartment buildings. But ultimately, China is now too big for the population it has, and you got to remember, China's population is now shrinking,
Yeah.
and it will actually fall apart because by the end of this century, China may have only third, maybe even a quarter of the people it has now.
Yeah, the birth rate's like 0.3 or 0.4%. I mean, it's like Europe's very low at 1.3, but China's right around that 0.3, 0.4, which is unsustainable for a culture
Right.
and a population. Below 1.5 is not sustainable for a population at all. So there's definitely trouble down the road with China, which is why I've been saying for a long time, I think you're going to see India leapfrog China in economic prowess in the next 4 to 5 years.
Yeah. Well, India right now has a much higher growth rate than China.
Yeah.
India's demographic profile right now is near perfect. Towards about 2060, 2070, India will have something like 600 million more people than China. I mean, the numbers are just staggering.
Wow. Wow. So Gordon, thank you so much for this time. This is invaluable information. What would you like to share with folks first about the, kind of your opinion on what may happen? And I always ask that. No one's going to hold you to it because nobody knows. You can't even verify the assumption base. And then how can we get a hold of you? How can we follow you? And we see you on the news and on TV all the time, but let us know kind of your opinion to wrap it up and then how we can get a hold of you or follow you online.
Yeah. I think that the China we'll see in a year from now will be unrecognizable from the one we have today because of the political instability and because of the economy, which is the fundamental driver of China. And so a lot of the assumptions we make about China today, I think won't be true. We got to be prepared because China can lash out. Xi
Right.
Jinping, in order to change what he may think to be an unsustainable trajectory, in other words, him losing power, might decide that cause a confrontation, not so much to rally the Chinese people, because the Chinese people don't want war, but to prevent other senior Communist Party figures from challenging him. So we got to be worried about him taking us by surprise.
Hmm.
I write about all this stuff on X at GORDONGCHANG, and I archive all my articles for free on my website, which is www.gordonchang.com.
Well, Gordon, this has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for stopping by here. We're a little bit over time at 35 minutes. A wealth of information, wealth of knowledge. Heck of a guy too. Very nice guy. So thank you for stopping by here. Maybe we can get you back here in a few months and get an update on what's going on in Asia.
I would love to do that, Eric, and thank you so much for this opportunity.
Absolutely, absolutely. And as always, God bless you all. God bless this country, and we'll see you next time on the Rice Report. Have a good day, everybody.